The purpose of this video is to locate where some of the scenes in the movie The Professionals were filmed. In this way, if you have seen the movie and are able to visit Valley of Fire State Park outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, the hike along the White Dome's trail loop will be so much more rewarding. The first major set is Raza's camp, and the other is the camp at the mouth of the Slot Canyon. The plot, in brief, is that the wife of a rich American, played by Ralph Bellamy, is kidnapped by Raza, played by Jack Palance, who is the Mexican bandit. Bellamy hires the 4 best men he can find to retrieve his wife, played by Claudia Cardinale. For the remainder of the story, you must rent or purchase the movie, both for how it ends and to have a better understanding of the filming locations. The sites are quite accessible along the White Dome's trail. What made this movie great was not the hackneyed Western plot involving a pursuit and rescue, but the cast of stars that signed on to do the movie. The Professionals included Lee Marvin, Burt Lancaster, Robert Ryan, and Woody Strode. They were also supported by Jack Palance, Claudia Cardinale, and Ralph Bellamy. Well-known Mexican actors in the movie were Joe DeSantis, Rafael Bertrand, and Jorge Martinez de Hoyos. Raza's camp, which appears to be an old mission in disrepair, plays a major role in the movie. This is where the kidnapped wife is being held. As it turns out, the location of the mission occupies most of the present-day parking lot at the White Dome's Loop trailhead. To better understand the sets, I will point out some of the points of interest. First is the path that leads to the Loop Trail today. Next, the set contained a watchtower where a guard was always posted. Note the hill behind the tower with the vertical notch. Next is what I call the Big Rock, to the right of which is the rock crusher or mill. And finally, the cistern leading to the water tower. This photo of the camp shows again the water tower, the big rock next to the mill. This picture shows where the previous camp structures would be located. The position of the water tower, what I call the big rock, to the right of which was the mill or the rock crusher, Cardinale's room, and the gate to the corral. The eastern part of the camp shows the main gate, Cardinale's room again, the big rock with the mill, but most importantly, take note of the 2 prominent boulders that were present then and are still present now that help to locate the east wall of Cardinale's room and other structures like the picnic area that is there today. This current photograph shows how those 2 prominent boulders relate to the picnic area and where the east wall and main gate would be located. The next 2 photos have overlays that show what the camp scene would have looked like superimposed over the present-day parking lot, which gives one a better idea of where the movie set was located. At one point in the movie, the four professionals were perched on a ridge overlooking Raza's camp in order to decide how best to rescue Claudia Cardinale. Looking south from the parking lot, one can see the crest of the hill where they were located. Their view down into the village is depicted here. In this view, the series of markers identifying the rock segments serve to verify that this is the exact location where they were. Pause the video and look more closely at the segments if you wish. The marker here shows the spot where the four men lay prone viewing the village. The view across the parking lot to the other tall sandstone wall also serves to triangulate their position. While they are still at the observation point, in this view, Marvin is asking Lancaster if he can dynamite the water tower at a critical moment. I felt that if I could verify their location, that the crest of the hill would be confirmed. Notice that between them on the wall in the background is a dark vertical line with 5 small dark circles extending diagonally to the left. Also, just behind Burt's head, way in the distance on that red hill, is a boulder. Well, with a little searching, I was able to confirm these 2 markers as shown here. Next, it is off to the burned-out Cantina location, where the professionals established their base camp at the mouth of the Slot Canyon. So in the movie, when Burt Lancaster first approached the ruins of the Cantina, he came right through here. Obviously, his horse could not make it down that narrow path, so this was a little bit of Hollywood magic. So the way it was filmed, he started about right here and just sort of came across this sandy part and went right up to the area where those ruins are. Now, you see this pile of rocks over here? This was actually built up, that's why that's here, to look something like the main wall that remains. So he rode right through here between this wall, which was a wall at the time, it's fallen apart, and this wall. And in the movie, this wall had a lot of writing on it because the setting was the Mexican Revolutionary War. So there were some Viva Villa markings on the wall here. But they've taken all of that down. Those 3 beams you can definitely see in the movie. And that middle beam is where Burt Lancaster was rigging the last part of his dynamite charge. So he was sitting on top of the wall with his feet hanging over that middle beam, and he placed the last fuse for that. So this is where Burt Lancaster came out. That rock, that smooth rock in the middle, is clearly seen in many of the scenes that were taken when they were in this area. So now it all makes sense. The parking lot up there was Raza's camp, and this was their rendezvous point in the canyon. Now, in one scene, Burt Lancaster had gone ahead, and Woody Strode and Lee Marvin climbed up these rocks here in order to find a position to rescue Burt Lancaster from hanging upside down. You can clearly see that in the movie where they scale these rocks. And then on top, in another scene, Lee Marvin was up there with binoculars, supposedly looking over the open desert, but indeed he was just sitting up there. And so the story goes, he was so drunk at one point in time that one of the director's helpers had to make sure he was okay up there and wouldn't fall down. And they said the other reason why they wanted to help him, because Burt Lancaster, who was a stickler for making movies, would have been very upset with him being up there and drunk and not doing what he was supposed to do. So this is all that remains of their little camp. This sign is well known to anybody who comes through. It shows the encampment up there in the parking lot. So the movie was released in 1966, so they were here in 1965. They were here in the winter because if you'll notice in the movie, they have on coats at times. And in some of the outtakes, they all rush in and put on their coats while they're waiting for the next scene. So Burt Lancaster was up there on the middle beam completing the fuse placement for the dynamite that they were going to use when Raza's men came through the slot canyon. And below that is where they sort of camped out. And they had that canopy across the beams for shelter from the sun, although it was in winter when they filmed. And all of this background you can clearly see in the movie. So there's no way that Burt Lancaster came down that canyon on horseback. They started right there where the sand ends, and then he just sort of rode across here and over into the slot canyon. This was the other wall that was erected at the time. Obviously it's sort of fallen apart, and I guess the park didn't want to put it back together. So Burt Lancaster rode between this wall and this wall, down into Kaolin Wash and into the Slot Canyon. So when Burt Lancaster came through, he rode across here and headed down into Kaolin Wash, turned to the right, and headed into the Slot Canyon. The problem that I have is that there is an 8 to 10 foot elevation on the path that Lancaster took, such that today when one is hiking the loop, one tends to veer to the left to obtain a more gradual descent into the wash. Knowing how creative the Hollywood folks are, I bet that they modified that slope with sand and other materials in order to create a more gradual descent. Much like in the movie Shane, when Alan Ladd crosses the creek to enter the Starrett farm, the creek was in reality a dry irrigation ditch. So the crew filled the channel with water, then placed rocks and sand up to within 2 inches of the surface in order to not have the horse trip or panic when crossing the ditch. So that in reality, lad and horse were able to walk on water. Now, notice the tree trunk hanging across the canyon, because we'll discuss that later. The rock ledge, the edge of which has now fallen into the canyon floor. The depressed striped area, and what I call the George Washington Head. This is that same striped depression today. This is the path by which Lancaster entered the wash, and the George Washington Head is still located there today. Now, what I don't know is how they got the actors and crew down here every day. There's no road into here, and I'm not sure they were all set for climbing down that canyon and going back up every day, because while they were filming, they stayed in Las Vegas. And back then they were, I believe they were in downtown Las Vegas, because it said that Lee Marvin was annoyed by the howdy cowboy sign that's on Fremont Street that used to bellow out howdy. And we're not sure, but we're told that Woody Strode sent an arrow into the cowboy and put him out of commission so that Lee Marvin could get some sleep. So this is Kaolin Wash. You have two choices here. You can go up this way, which is the Slot Canyon, and you can go down this way, which also has a small, colorful slot canyon as well. Burt Lancaster then went up this particular trail. And I'll bet they didn't go too far in, because the trail narrows into a slot canyon. Now, what I'm trying to find now is where they hung Burt Lancaster upside down. This is the entrance to the Slot Canyon. There is the arch, and Burt Lancaster scurried up that arch. This is Lancaster hanging upside down, having been captured by the bandits. Next is the tree trunk from which he was hung that was mentioned earlier. The ledge to the right is the focal point for establishing this site. I believe that this tree was a prop for the hanging scene, since nowhere else in this area are there trees of this size or type. Additional confirmation of this site is the opposite view down the canyon. Note the sloped rock formation in the background in the movie segment and the matched view from today. Finally, in this scene, there appears to be a peaked hill behind the bandit. Initially, I could not confirm the location of the peak and had some doubt as to this being the site of the hanging. However, after further observation, I found that the peaked hill was not a peak, but simply a rock outcropping filmed from a lower angle. Site confirmed. If they were further in, I guess these rocks weren't here then. These big boulders might have fallen actually since then. You can see that sort of bare-faced area up there. So that's probably fallen since 1965 and sort of blocked this part, because this part is still maneuverable by horse. You see that needle up there, or that arch? That arch is key because that shows up when Burt Lancaster is setting up the dynamite. The overlay photo here clearly establishes the site where Burt tossed a rope over the cliff to place dynamite charges. The next views show the slot canyon as it approaches the arch section, and the black wall to the left appears. Burt is rappelling up the wall to place dynamite charges. The impressions shown in the rocks clearly establish this location. One final location, I believe that these photos of Raza riding to the rescue of Cardinale match the open area at the beginning of the Fire Wave Trail. And in the second photo, the Rock of Gibraltar is seen. This movie ranks high on the list of Western dramas. It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards in 1967 for Best Director, Screenplay, and Cinematography. It lost in all 3, but there is no shame in this, since The Professionals was up against the movie A Man for All Seasons, which was the Academy favorite and won in all 3 of the categories. This classic movie, released in 1966, has been relegated to the dusty shelves of movie repositories. Westerns have been laid to rest by the computerized fantasy action hero movies of today. If you are lucky, you can catch the movie for free on Turner Classic Movies. Never again will you enjoy the acting of 4 veteran stars in one movie production, working together not only for the money, but for the sheer joy of making a contribution to the cinematic arts. I grew up watching their movies and loved the characters that they portrayed. Time has taken the 4 professionals from us, but they will never be forgotten.